Part 3, the slow method, Yogi Bhajan and Kundalini Yoga. 2 years later, after this excursion in 2017, where I went to see the ICR in Ontario, this year, 2019, actually just like about 2 weeks ago, around the same time, new moon in Virgo, I went to see, with my friend Janine, I went to see another sort of Kundalini-themed camp. But this one was not an armchair philosopher's rag. This one had me wielding the breath of fire, chanting mantras, integrating the secret Vedic codes of the chakras and the hidden energy bodies latent in the cerebrospinal plexus of the human aura field, in methodical, patient, yet enduring and disciplined ways. Aura field referring to the consciousness that these Kundalini people understand the science of the awakening of the spine through. Language is a funny thing. And I like to use the Kundalini yoga people's spiritual language because that's the way they've come through. Just always know that you can understand it through your own some more scientific, biological, cerebrospinal language. Part of this whole video is just talking about this funny duality. You know, I like to be a mouthpiece for it. On a side note, my friend Janine has always been my personal connect to the Divine Mother consciousness, which I consider Kundalini to be. I really do vibe with this Kundalini, the spiritual nature of this. So bear with me because I always like to show both sides of this debate. The spiritual advocates of Kundalini swear that this thing is an entity unto itself. It's a consciousness. But of course, you don't have to drink that Kool-Aid to witness the marvel of the genius Ubermensch in your own nervous system. The idea that you know, the Kundalini people have this language where they say, you don't find Kundalini, the cosmic serpent finds you. It bears the resemblance to the synchronicity experience. If anybody's, some people are weird about this synchronicities thing, where they say, oh my God, 419 has just been following me all month. You ever heard a person say something like that? Oh my God, it's 111, everybody. That whole thing. It's like everything, there's no coincidences, and everything that happens to you is actually a part of some backdraft of a meta-programmed plan for you to unfold your own illumination. It seems like a whole lot of hopeful chumbawamba, as I like to say. This represents the religious side of this Kundalini experience. And I'm into it, but I won't push it here. But the Yogi Bhajan people are all about it. And it is an important element in the whole diorama that I'm trying to portray in this video. The idea that the experiences that happen to you are being attracted to you by a karma which you have been in your whole life, but it's fate and destiny meeting you through this intelligence that's hidden in your cerebrospinal centers. It's like before you hit puberty, you don't think about girls or guys if you're the opposite sex. To me. You don't think about any of these things. You don't attract people at the same way. But once you hit puberty, something wakes up in you where you are bound to attract others of whatever sex, no matter what sex you are. You attract others who are also looking to make karmic passage and to learn the lessons of how to deal with sexuality and everything that it implies. You would start to attract these people. It just happens because your hormones just start pouring it out. Is that something that you consciously do? No, it's your body doing it to you. And in the same way, that's what the Kundalini people say, is that higher intelligence finds you If you're looking for it, it means it's already looking for you. That's how they talk about it. So this synchronicity thing is an interesting theme, but it is quite, it's framed in a metaphysical language. It's part of the Sikhism. We talk about Yogi Bhajan as a Sikh yogi, S-I-K-H. And Sikhism relates, if you know any of Rumi's poetry, he talks about how it's all that you are the ground of consciousness, you're the center of the universe, and everything unfolds from your karmic experience. So that's something to keep in mind, and it's something that is a challenge for the materialistic people who are watching this video and trying to digest all of this. Again, I would consider it at the level of biological intelligence. As soon as a new nervous plexus opens up and a species opens up to a new place, we're bound to attract new lessons. Right? Now, who was Yogi Bhajan? Yogi Bhajan lived an illustrious life as a Sikh yogi in what was British India at the time. Sorry. Yogi Bhajan famously led his village of 7,000 people 325 miles on foot to safety in New Delhi when he was 18 years old. He could do this because he had undergone the tutelage of an enlightened yoga teacher. From the age of 8 years old, he was working on this. He had the privilege, his family fed him and supported him in just practicing yoga, unlocking whatever's going on in these cerebrospinal centers. And he had a firm grasp of his human impulses in his mind and his body by that time, by the time he did this pilgrimage with his village. To my understanding, which is rather limited because I'm only recently getting into Yogi Bhajan, to my understanding, Yogi Bhajan is well known for being one of the first to combine the mystical Eastern philosophy of Sikhism into his personal yoga practice. Probably, maybe not one of the first, but again, one of the first people to be recognized in our Western yoga culture to do so. Tapping into old texts, along with his teacher's insight, allowed Yogi Bhajan to become a living vessel for embodying his particular brand of Ayurvedic psychology, mixed with intense devotional meditation coming from the Sikhism. We're going to explain what this devotion means in a scientific framework again. I like to consider it as an experiment. And if you're in an experiment trying to open up these cerebrospinal centers in yourself, you have to fully give yourself to it. Like any good scientist knows. Save your skepticism for after the experiment, and then do your analysis after the conclusions have come through. Then you can make a clearer conclusion. If you begin to question the experiment halfway through, what's the point of even doing it? I'm going to talk more about that. But that's what this devotional thing comes from. The intense devotional meditation of the Sikhs. So, all of this combinations of Yogi Bhajan's initial practices led to an intuitive insight into the evolving cerebrospinal plexus and the chakra and aura body associations of the human nervous system, its subtler neurospheres and electromagnetic frequencies, in so many words. This is all, the whole Yogi Bhajan schema is something that'd be difficult to really convey just in this video. Maybe I'll do something on it just to show his whole thing. As all the Yogi Bhajan people tend to submit, the human body works in mysterious ways. And Yogi Bhajan's metaphysical science seems to get it, according to his followers, of course, the ways of the human body. How each plexus's lesson as it evolves and opens up is supposed to go, and to be balanced in order that the higher ones can be unfolded. I dabbled in this whole thing enough to understand its ramifications in regard to psychological integration and the slow and patient Kundalini unveiling initiation. And this stands opposed from Gopi Krishna's fast and possibly dangerous method. This is the grand two-sided yin and yang to this whole video, the fast versus slow. Yogi Bhajan was one who embraced the slow but patient and yet quite disciplined and enduring method. If you know Yogi Bhajan's thing, some people have been driven into the ground with the amount of discipline that he portrays in his practice. What most people don't realize, of course, is that his discipline is secondary to the love. He wants to have an intense devotional love and faith in the unfolding intelligence of the human body and of the mystery that is the evolution. He gets to a sense of love for the planet. And speaking to the planet, he says, I'm going to fully give myself in devotion to the intelligence that connects me to the planet and that is trying to open me up as the best contributor to the planetary ecosphere as I can be. So that's where his discipline is truly coming from. And he invites a lot of discipline from his followers. They do sadhana and singing and chanting at like 3 a.m. for like 2.5 hours. And a lot of people have experiences of it being very tough. For me, it's interesting that Yogi Bhajan takes to this discipline, and it's a harrowing, tough thing. But it's pushed from within your own effort. It's not smashed on you in the way that Gopi Krishna would. Gopi Krishna's Kundalini awakening is. Do you see the difference? In Gopi Krishna's sense, you get the energy moving, and then you just got to deal with it. And it's like, I hope you don't die on the way coming through this thing. Whereas Yogi Bhajan says, if you want to have that energy, you've got to push yourself to go through the harrowing Kundalini Syndrome. But if you do it yourself, you can drop out any time, because it's coming from your own desire to connect to planetary intelligence, not just an egoic desire to gain all power by going through a harrowing experience. So anyway, this all sounds hairier than it really is, to be honest. In my experience, I'm a yogi and I could dig the whole like discipline of everything. If you understand all of this in this Aquarian New Age context, it goes lockstep with Gopi K's notion of our evolving biotechnology. Much of human evolution's most recent developments, this is something that I got from a very intelligent man at this camp that I went to with Janine. His name was Har Prakash, and he was a very well-informed fellow about all of these Kundalini things, but also the biological factor. He talked about how the most recent development in human evolution is the cerebral frontal cortex of the brain. After millions of years of evolution and having all these other parts of our bodies opening up in different ways, we're now at a place where we can think with awareness about what we're doing. This is something we've never had to deal with. It involves processing, computing, and assimilating data coming in from our senses. Something which, we can organize these impressions that we get through our senses, which is something that most animals have not had to deal with. Most animals just feel the one impulse, I need food, bang, go towards it. Once I don't need food anymore, I'm going to wait until I do need food, until I need to have sex, whatever it is. They don't think about the data. They just feel the data and let it flow through them. Of course, there's a wisdom to this, because A lot of humans are developing the frontal intelligence, the rational cortex, and they're losing their touch with their animal impulses. Just another fun part of this great evolutionary debate. So it stands to reason that the next intuitive jump in our evolution would involve us engaging the organs of the body's volition and of our actions consciously and interacting with the hierarchy of physical, sexual, emotional, and mental and existential needs involved with the psychological throne of the frontal lobe. All other animals just go about this hierarchy of needs just unconsciously. We do it too, but now we're learning to consciously deal with this unconscious hierarchy. That's what the New Age mantras and disciplinary exercises aim to do in Kundalini Yoga, is to get us in touch through a neurocerebral language with each of this hierarchy of needs. The chakras, amongst other systems, represent ways to challenge resistances we have to integrating and understanding these new spheres of neurological control through the frontal lobe in our consciousness. This happens through a systematic pattern of conditioning and intelligent neuroprogramming. Anybody into the Yogi Bhajan thing, I'm hoping you recognize this as the chakras. The chakras are like a neuroprogram. They're there, according to this metaphysical science. The chakras are there, and when we understand them as a hierarchy of needs, we can deal with them intelligently. So we can balance our lower physical needs in order to invite a more engagement with our emotional needs. And once we balance out our emotional needs, we can invite energy to engage in a more mental, symbolic solar plexus sphere. You know, that's what this whole chakra thing is always about. The idea is that Kundalini Yoga is a set of systemic neuroprograms for becoming aware of these unfolding cerebrospinal plexus stages and understandings. Now, I don't know if this sounds like too wishy-washy. I'm trying to make it scientific for the scientists while also keeping it integrated in the Yogi Bhajan people's language. Hopefully it's coming through properly. What I will say is that, unfortunately, in my opinion, in my experience, I had a criticism for each man. Gopi Krishna, I've got my criticisms for. Again, it's too fast. Now, I'm not saying Yogi Bhajan is too slow. I think that Yogi Bhajan's method is good. We're going to talk about this. But in my opinion, the Yogi Bhajan Aquarians tend to skip this science and psychology-based assessment of his work. They skip right for the devotional guru, divine cosmic mother worship, religiosity, which I find severely turns people off to these brilliantly intuitive and truly psychedelic mind manifesting practices. Like, these are truly psychedelic in the way that that word is meant to be. I think that the Aquarian agenda of these Kundalini Yoga people, it just turns people off. It's like, oh my gosh, this wishy-washy Aquarian thing. You know, what proof do you have that there's a puberty which we are opening ourselves to? Because it's like a bunch of children. Imagine a bunch of kids being like locked on an island. It's an interesting thing to think about. Imagine a bunch of kids being abandoned on an island at like 8 years old. Okay, so none of them are going through this puberty thing yet, and none of them have ever needed to understand it. 4 years later, all the kids are now 12 years old. And someone says, like, I've heard that mom and dad used to get together and do this sex thing. And everyone's like, what? Like, what does that mean? Because they've never understood it. They look at their genitals. They notice that there's a male and a female. And there's an implied use of it. And now puberty's coming through and they're all like, oh, wow, now I've got this energy and I want to rock and roll with it. Imagine what their consciousness would be like. Imagine if, imagine if one of the kids said, this seems to me to be a stage that we're supposed to experience, understand, and get through, and use constructively for our own purposes, for our own joy. What would all the other kids say to that? How do you know? You haven't been through the puberty experience. How do you know that it's a stage? How can any of us know? So this is what we're experiencing, is that we've got one kid, Yogi Bhajan, who's saying, I think this is for a reason, and I know how to channel it constructively. And all the other kids are like, he's just trying to get some tail, man. So it must sound very strange to talk about things in this way, in this language that the Kundalini Yoga people do. So this is my point, is that I think that the language of the Yogi Bhajan lineage comes through right away, right off the bat, and tells about how you ought to be devotionally invested in integrating all these things. And some people are just like, man, I don't have the time. It sounds like it could be cool, but I got my other things going on, right? And I think that this Aquarian New World evolution language turns a lot of would-be yogis off because of the frilly language. That's what I'm trying to figure out here. Truth be told, to engage the neurospheres, you can't observe it from outside yourself. You can't really read about it, How many of you have read about all the chakras and, with cookbooks that say red chakra relates to physical security, feelings of physical security and gratification. Its color is red. Its element is earth. It's low gravity, and then you look at the next one, the orange chakra. It relates to water. The color is orange. You read this cookbook thing, and you're like, it just, what does it all mean, and who really cares, right? What does it have to do with me loving myself and everyone around me? So when you look at it from this armchair philosopher's perspective, it just looks like another cookbook way of some idiot yogi trying to tell you how to live your life according to his schema. I've got the perfect way for you to live. It has to do with these chakras, and I swear they're good, man. So in order to really experience the truth of this whole chakra thing, you got to drink the Kool-Aid. You have to fully absorb yourself in the emotions of the mind. You have to fully absorb yourself with the emotions of the mind experiment and actually involve bhakti, which translates as passion or surrender. You have to include this passionate surrender into these practices in order to effectively get out of your own head. Because it is the resistance of your old programming, the so-called ego, that obstructs your capacity to make new imprints and programs. We all don't realize that we're running on neuroprograms and old ways of being, especially since they keep us alive. They've kept us alive all this time. Don't fix if it ain't broken, right? So everyone has to, in order to, especially in this materialist schema world of the Western world and using Western language, you have to get out of your own head. You have to get out of the stage that you're at now in order to get to the next thing, to get to the next stage. What's funny is that when you let yourself go in the experiment like that, the subject and the object become one. The awareness of the inherent cerebral spinal plexus intelligence inside you, the apple tree that's trying to shed the skin that you're in now. The implied mature apple tree has to, like if you're an apple tree right now, you've got a skin and you have to open up and gnarl out and just like every snake has to release its skin in order to be the bigger snake that's coming out. The awareness of inherent cerebrospinal intelligence has to override your previous resistance, your previous ways of being. And when this happens, you're confronted with a mysterious awareness which seems alien. This is when you start to drink the Kool-Aid and think, okay, Kundalini's coming to me. This chakra, this energy wants me to understand and involve myself with these new intelligence layers. What the mystics call the presence of the divine. You invoke the presence of the divine. Don't let me lose you yet, folks. Through this holotropic, transpersonal perspective of the self, this whole cosmic worship of a religious cosmic spirit can be viewed in its proper place as a perfectly rational and reasonable experiment in active evolution. Do you understand? The mystics don't speak of it that way because they're in the experiment. And when you do an experiment properly, you must save your skepticism till the end and engulf thyself in thy prayer, as it were. When you go in the trance, when you start to try to understand the chakras by actually engaging yourself in them, it's annoying because you can't armchair philosopher it anymore. You have to be like, okay, so there's a little bit of educating. You read the cookbook, you learn the thing, but what you got to do is go to one of these classes with a teacher who's qualified, sit in the second chakra thing, and when they talk about the second chakra, they're not going to give you cookbook things. They're going to embody the character of the chakra, and they'll be sweet. They'll be loving. They'll embody all of the things that relate to the sacral chakra and to sexuality. They'll be enticing and they'll be seductive because, of course, sexuality is not actually a bad thing. It's just something that we have to integrate. It's one of the things I loved about this camp is that everybody treated sexuality very lightly, not in the Christian epithet. They considered it as a cerebrospinal plexus energy that you have to develop and understand in balance with the rest of the dimensions of human awareness. You got to speak your truth of what you're experiencing to wipe away the lower understanding, the old ways of being. So you have to go fully in with the experiment. That's what the Sikh people are doing. S-I-K-H. And by, again, I'm a very scientific fellow. Science first, like devotional hopefulness second. I consider myself to be very scientific, and that's why it's taken me so long to really kind of get into this thing. But I always take it with a grain of salt. But I do it. I mean, it's funny, if you talk to me, I'm going to say a thing where it's like I go back and forth, and I love to fully open myself to the truth is that I've had like deep Kundalini experiences. I've felt like a cosmic mother is drawing me to understand these cerebrospinal intelligences within myself. And when you actively engage in these practices in this way, you can more fully see what it all means. I'm just giving you the view of things here, folks. I'm not trying to yank you any which way, although you'll see that I've got this funny trick that I'm doing. Let's see if I can pull it out. By giving into the experiment, you may even come to experience this Kundalini thing for yourself. And when you do, I invite you to take a walk on the wild side and cry in the divine embrace of the compassionate cosmic force. I dare you to. What's the worst thing that could happen? It's only an experiment after all, isn't it? Stay tuned for my next video where I admit that this whole thing was a trick to sucker you scientists into the synchronicity experience. Ha ha ha. Is he joking? I don't know. Whoa. All in all, Yogi Bhajan's method. I should speak to that. What I was trying to do there is to say that this whole thing will give you this experience of this cosmic synchronicity where everything is happening for good reason. Your karma, your matured apple tree is calling you to let go of old ways of being and to give yourself to this experiment so that you can fully see what this Kundalini yoga thing means. If anything, all I'm transmitting with this video is that when Kundalini yoga people talk to you about it all, this is also for the Kundalini yoga people. I think it's important for them to understand that we're never going to have a world full of people engaging these cerebrospinal chakra centers if no one can understand it. I'm kind of criticizing the language of Yogi Bhajan people because it turns people off. The synchronicity thing, the spiritual side, the religious side of this turns people off. And that's too bad because it should all be looked at as an experiment, not some religious precept that's being smacked on from on top of us, you know? It's like if you really desire to engulf yourself in God, or if you really desire to unfold your fullest intelligence through a schema that's already made for your body and for your mind, then you have to give in to this experiment. You have to fully devote yourself to it. And seekers of Kundalini yoga should see it as an experiment, should see it as something of their own doing for themselves, for the intelligence inside themselves, not for the sake of the guru, not for the sake of Yogi Bhajan, because as Yogi Bhajan said, don't love me, love the teachings, become 10 times greater than me. The more we can see it from this objective perspective, the more people will not be turned off by this language of giving yourself fully to the yoga experience and having devotion with it. So, anyway, all in all, Yogi Bhajan's method is the correct one, I think, because it represents a slow, in terms of this fast versus slow Kundalini thing, Yogi Bhajan's efforts and method represents a slow, patient unfolding of this Kundalini energy's spinal heights in a pace which we can diligently cultivate and rebuild our nervous systems through via the efforts we employ in our practice. That's why it's my contention that Gopi Krishna's language and his implied concept was correct. I think that the way Gopi Krishna talked about it as a biological thing, a stage of planetary puberty for which we are learning, we have to understand, I think that that language was correct, although his method was wrong, because Gopi Krishna he wasn't a yogi himself. He saw intelligently the end lines of human evolution and wanted to jump for it without trying to live on Earth at the same time, without understanding the human experience in a way. He understood that, but like he just didn't, his rationale was like burned, fluxed out by the Kundalini experience that he had, you know? It's like Friedrich Nietzsche expected everybody to be an Ubermensch, a Superman, right now. Stop what you're doing, stop whatever lessons you've got going on, and just invoke this thing and deal with it, you know? Like, it's good that we have these figures who wrote about these Supermensch states, but we don't necessarily need to lose our own connect with what we need as individuals to invoke our highest potentials. So that's why, Gopi Krishna, it seems to me like he had a bit of wartime consciousness in his vibe. He experienced World War I and World War II, and when he was talking about Kundalini, he had an impulsive urgency, which had him talking about it in a way that was urgent, and he wanted to save the world from this war thing, and it reflected an urgency which ultimately was contradictory in the end, because part of Kundalini yoga is getting a whole, even in Gopi Krishna's consciousness, he understood that the human impulses, human energy impulses, are wild and untamed. And he talked about how we needed to have someone in power in worldly politics who was in touch and fully in tune with their human impulses, so that they could diligently discern how human affairs ought to be organized. He himself wasn't fully in tune with these human impulses, I think, because he had this wartime consciousness. I mean, he went through the Kundalini thing, but he still had his ego, and he talked about it from this world power politics way, which again I think is important. It's part of that cosmic father thing I mentioned. The father has to know how to say to other families in the community that our thing is good, and to deal with other families in the community in that way. I'm more of a divine mother guy like Yogi Bhajan, who says, forget all that crap, look within to the unfoldment of your own bliss, and everything will beat to that drum. As the Yogi Bhajan people say, vibrate the cosmos, and the cosmos shall unfold the path. Yogi Bhajan's language, the Aquarian New Age thing, seemed like a cult. Both of these guys have a cult vibe. I like to go head first into these culty vibes, see them for myself, and go, okay, that was interesting. Now what can I take from it? I'm a scientist. Go fully in with the experience, drink the Kool-Aid, and then come out of it with an objective skeptic's point of view. Understand it in the context of other teachers who were doing the same thing. That's my thing. So while Yogi Bhajan's Aquarian New Age language was off-putting, I think his method for dealing with Kundalini ultimately represented it was pretty spot on. The purification of the body through kriyas, the slow, diligent, loving efforts towards unfolding and inviting this intelligence resting in the neurocerebrospinal spheres in a way that was grounded in this neuroprogramming, this chakra language, this energy body language. I think that Yogi Bhajan had a lot to say about that, and it would be good for everyone in the world to see what is on offer there. So this has been basically this whole video, folks. I hope this wasn't too mashed up. Me myself, I'm learning how best to be a messenger for whatever instinctive understandings that I learn through my experiences and practices. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I hope I've kept the two poles as a duality, like a duality, but also showed a glimmer of the sattvic truth of unity where they meet, in terms of how these two men's conceptions are important to the world today. One final note I would like to add is that the fear of missing out on the cosmic snake that I talked about, not attaining the ecstatic, spontaneous Kundalini experience, this is something which I believe psychedelic shamanic medicines can help us to bridge. And that includes ayahuasca, that includes mushrooms, and other psychochemical agents to varying degrees. this is a Dustin Cormier final add-on to this whole video. Through psychedelics, one can temporarily hold the stranglehold of the mind's lower level patterning habits and hold the space for deep experiences of holotropical awareness, introspective vision, and to create new imprints in those psychedelic flashes. Psychedelics help us to make ourselves in the state of fresh imprinting. In the same way where we're in puberty, we haven't settled our reactions to that cerebrospinal cortex just yet. Once that door opens for puberty, we start to make an imprint on what it is. And psychedelics, the nature of psychedelics can help to temporarily dissolve the imprints that we've made at each stage and allow us to look at it with more objectivity, more discernment, and to re-imprint new neurological grooves regarding these important human stages. Everyone doing ayahuasca in the Amazon is doing just this and getting this experience. For me, I think that even Yogi Bhajan's yoga can be a little bit dry for a lot of people. Ayahuasca can ripple through and even bring a bit of that, like we said, how the Kundalini can shake you up and make the imprint stages more available for you to play with. Gopi Krishna said that once you open this thing up, it'll be hell, but once you get to the end of it, you'll have full control of your instincts and you'll have energy coming through and you'll know how to deal with yourself better. Except that his way talks about it being just a bit too much of that all at once right away. A little bit of controlled psychedelic yoga is a way for us to draw the heights of this pink and purple energy down to ourselves in a way that we can slowly integrate and be blissful about, so that when we do go into the dry, disciplined yoga practices, we're not just performing the shell of discipline. Yogi Bhajan gave us lots of shells of hard, tough, constant mantras and repetitions and neuro programs for understanding each of these cerebrospinal centers. He has mantras for each one. You say a certain mantra a certain number of times. You stick to the number. The number means a symbol. Then you go to the next one, and you have another set of mantras with another number that all reflects the body of the chakra and of these elements of human evolution at each stage. It's all great stuff, but it can be a little dry, and I think psychedelics are a way to invite us to see the bliss which is there first. And just like it was in Yogi Bhajan's experience. Yogi Bhajan was a yogi. He saw the bliss of what all this could bring him, and he took it from a level of bliss before he engaged in the discipline, I think. And I think psychedelics are a good way to help ground that out. So, ladies and gentlemen, for all that being said, this has been my video on the duality of the fast versus slow methods of Kundalini awakening. Gopi Krishna representing the fast, spontaneous Kundalini Syndrome invocation, and Yogi Bhajan representing the other extreme of the slow, patient, diligent, loving Divine Mother coming to you, tapping you softly on the head and saying, "My darling, I love you, and it's time for you to go out and go to school." It's just like any good mother wants to keep them for themselves, but the Divine Mother knows, I'm always here and I'm always with you, and it's time for you to leave what you've been and to start exploring how to unfold the next cerebrospinal layer of unfolding human intelligence for the individual as well as for the planetary collective. Yogi Bhajan's thing is really good in that way. All in all, I hope you've been given a proper glimpse into the ground shared by these two godfathers of Western Kundalini, and I hope that you stay tuned for more videos about Kundalini consciousness coming soon, amongst all the other things that I'm interested in talking about on this channel. This is Dustin Cormier. I am How to Rock Spirit. I would love to see what everybody thinks. I would love to see different comments and perspectives on these two men. And I hope you'll join me in either being scientific and grounding out the Aquarian people a little bit, calm down, let's use a language that we can all understand so that the world can get onto this Kundalini thing without faithfulness. A little bit too much faith in Kundalini yoga makes people question it, and you should always question authority, as Timothy Leary has told us. And on the other hand, we can also, as Kundalini people, shake up the scientists and the materialists and guide them through their own language to help them understand why it is important to know that there's an intelligence, a chord of intelligence, a mature apple tree trying to pour through the apple seed that they are. I hope you guys can see both sides of what I'm trying to do here. I'm Dustin Cormier for How to Rock Spirit. I love doing this stuff with you guys. Like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. I'll be seeing you guys on the other side with more stuff about all these fun things that I love to talk about. Thank you so much for your time. Sat Nam.